This video has been made possible by viewers like yourselves. If you want to see more videos with the developers, or if you have any specific questions, feel free to leave your comments down below or like the video, because then I'll know that you want to see more. Alright, it's that time once again. Dev Talk. Last month we talked to Steven, and the month before that we talked to Steven as well, but due to the wonders of the holidays and a little side discussion that I had with somebody else, I wanted to talk to that somebody else. Byron, introduce yourself for me, please.
Hello, I'm Byron. What do? I am now a game designer on Stellaris. Previously, from summer 2020 to spring this year, I was QA, and then I stretched my creative muscles and tried my hand at a few design tasks and managed to convince the powers that be to let me move to design. Initially as a temporary measure, and that was from March through to May, and then from the start of this month, it's permanent.
Well, congratulations. But yeah, so we've come in from QA. That means that you have a very strong understanding of the underlying principles of the game, as well as where the weaknesses and the strength of the actual game lies. And coming in as a game designer, I can see that would be a really impactful thing. Based on that, considering you're now in that game design role, is there anything that we've already seen or that you've had a heavy hand in, as comparatively when Steven first came on board? He had a little bit of a side project in lithoids, and that turned into species traits, etc. Is there anything like that that you've already done that we don't personally know of, but you've actively worked on?
Well, funnily enough, similar background to Steven there, one of the first major things I worked on design-wise, and this was a good while back, was the plantoid species traits added in, 3.1 LEM, along with the catalytic processing civic. That was my first chance of really stretching creative muscles and trying my hand at design. And then, because I was shifted from QA to design for that interim period shortly before Overlord's release, I was one of the QAs most closely associated with the subjugation feature. And then when I shifted into design, my task suddenly went from, okay, find all the issues with subjugation to fix the issues you've found in subjugation and try and balance it as best you can. And that was the shift in perspective was very interesting, going from, okay, so if I do X, Y, and Z, and my overlord is this sort of empire, I encounter this issue, to suddenly going, okay, I found this issue. What do I actually need to change in the script to make it not happen? And how do I fix the various edge cases that come about from it? Like, one of the bugs that I've fixed for our hotfix, which I think we're hoping to release next week, is the whole, if you declare a war force ideology on another empire and their overlord was a Gestalt,
Yes.
ended up forcing ethics on the Gestalt empire,
Yes.
which shouldn't ever occur. And that's just happening because, that causes like hive minds to become democracies and suddenly start auto-purging all the hive-minded pops, which is hilarious, but a bug. And that happens as a consequence of, okay, so the overlord takes over being the war leader, and thus the war goals are enforced on the war leader and not the original subjects of the war declaration. So as a fix for that, I've gone in and changed the peace terms to go, okay, put these peace terms on the war leader if they're not a Gestalt, and any of their subjects that are in the war if they're also not a Gestalt empire. So now, if you've got the Blorg hive mind that is an overlord of both the United Nations of Earth and the Commonwealth of Man, and you declare force ideology war on the Commonwealth of Man, if the UNE is dragged in, when you win the war, your ethics will also be forced on the UNE as well as the Commonwealth. Because it made sense, well, if you're fighting both subjects, they should both be subject to the force ideology. And that was an interesting bug to fix.
I can see that to be a very interesting way of creating large federations relatively efficiently. Because one of the big ways of generating federations is not so much that you would invite them to a federation, but you would want to flip their ideology first and then afterwards butter them up and invite them in that sense.
Yeah.
So I can see this being yet another strategy in that regard, where a third party tries to do an ideology war and all of a sudden a whole bunch of people are pulled in, they lose the war, they have the same ideology, and poof, you have the perfect federation potential right there.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what sort of stories our players end up telling with those changes. And if it ends up being slightly too powerful, well, we'll be keeping track of what the community's posting both on our forums and the subreddit and various other places over summer, and I may go back after the summer vacation and tweak various AI acceptance values or the exact criteria to trigger certain events and such. Just if things seem to be a little bit unbalanced in the direction that we don't want them to be.
Yeah, this reminds me of a bug that was in Nemesis. I don't know if there was a bug, because I don't know if it was ever changed, where if the Galactic Emperor had a Force ideology war put on them and they would lose, you would get like a Republic Imperial Empire or something along those lines. We had
that's interesting.
Yeah, we had that in a stream, I believe, at one point when we did the release stream for it, and I lost a war by accident by fat fingering the surrender button, and I turned into a Republic Empire, which was very strange, and it made for the most random thing that happened in the end there. I don't think it was a bug, because it's one of those things that happens so late in the game that it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, and it's just funny, because you should be winning this war. But yeah, if you fat finger it, then you get into like really weird situations sometimes, which I think is very, very enjoyable.
I mean, back when we were in the process of developing Nemesis, we did decide, okay, if you do become the Galactic Emperor, and you do want to shift your ethics to become egalitarian, and be the Galactic Emperor, but also be a democracy, we're not going to stop you, because why should we? At that point, it's just, it's fun.
It's a bit of a sandbox experience, right? So
yeah. And yeah, if you end up being a fanatic egalitarian shared burdens empire that becomes the Galactic Emperor, and you want to go back to being fanatic egalitarian, but still have this iron fist over the galaxy, yeah, we should let you.
It's kind of like the Magna Carta, right? There is a representation of the people, but in the end, the king tells everybody what's actually going on, right? Yeah, that's fair, and that's fair. But so yeah, you work quite a lot on the species traits for plantoids and also catalytic processing. First of all, thank you for catalytic processing. It is by far my favorite civic in the game. I think it's
very welcome.
It's one of the best ones, I think, because it's just hilarious with the things that you can do with it, especially when it comes to food sources, etc., and then selling the results back to other people. So did you also work on budding and radiotrophic and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
All phototrophic, radiotrophic, budding, and catalytic processing were me sitting down and going, okay, we'd like to add some sort of traits and new civics to plantoids. What's thematically appropriate? What's within the realms of balance of that we'd like to give to them, and it's within the theme. And, well, the obvious thing is plants should be able to photosynthesize.
Right, that makes perfect sense.
So let's do that. And then I was doing some reading, and I've got friends who are done masters and PhDs in biology and massive nerds as well, and was reading about weird types of fungus, and it's like, okay, so there are some types of fungi that can thrive off radiation. Yeah, let's stick that in. That's fun. That makes sense. That's cool. So let's add that. And then there's also research into bioplastics and constructing advanced materials, not necessarily out of metals, but out of, well, organic compounds. And that's where the idea for organic reprocessing, catalytic converting, the various names the Civic has, came from. Because it's then, okay, so I can use long chains of polymers from, growing cellulose and the like, and convert those into bioplastics and use those to construct my spaceships.
Sure.
Instead of, well, digging up aluminium, smelting aluminium, and then making a spaceship out of that.
Sure. Even though you should probably want to build them out of titanium and carbon instead of aluminium, but I get the point.
Yeah, you get the point. Look, I've been playing a lot of Shipbreaker recently, and
It's so good, though. It's so relaxing. I wish
game is more relaxing than it should be.
I really wish it was in VR as well, but then they would need to render the image twice, and it's already too high in fidelity to begin with, so
Yeah.
it's problematic. But yeah, so in the day of, you get into the office or you work from home, depending on the situation. I don't know what your policies are.
Most days for me, I'm working in the office because it's easier to bounce ideas off other people if you're in the office and you're all in the same room. But we do have a couple of days a week where we can work from home if we want to.
Yeah, we have the same thing at my work. Creative jobs are difficult to execute when you're working at a distance and you're working from home, etc. So it's a little bit problematic. So modifiers. We talked a little bit about this in private recently, and we were talking about, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could, for instance, say, you could trigger a situation, or you could trigger a event based on, say, a tradition that you've unlocked. And you basically told me, yeah, you can totally do that. That's completely in the game.
You can easily do that.
And
so there's things like Steven's favorite event option, Eat the Envoys, where if you're a devouring swarm and the Galactic community sends you an angry worded letter going, you're breaking the law, and your responses will eat them. That event option is triggered by, I think it's the fact that you're a devouring swarm, so it checks your civics. There's nothing stopping events from checking, do you have this ascension perk, or do you have the civic, or do you have a certain tradition, or any one of probably several other 100 things. Hell, I could make an event option which goes, do you own Soul? If yes, you get this.
Right, but it also goes into the... Go ahead.
We can do it that specifically. It's like, if I can run a check on your country, empires are countries in script, it's weird, I can probably make an event option to fire off that. Or in the case of situations, situation approaches, or I could flip it the other way around. I could make it so that you could only have a tradition tree available if you've taken a certain event option from an archaeology site, as an example.
So
I've not done that, but you could.
Interesting. So essentially what you could do is, say you have an event, say 30 years into the game, you have an option for it, it has a situation, etc., and a situation option only becomes available if you have prosperity unlock number 3.
Yeah. That's doable in, well, designing it, as long as a piece of string, implementing it 5 minutes.
Sure. That's fair, because it checks the modifier. But here's then my question then. Why are the event options within the game not that granular in general? I understand that there is a certain amount of effort that goes into adding an event option, etc., and you want to be able to make sure that players can actually see it and not just 2% of the player base, but you can go super granular in this, and that's just something that I don't think that's reflected in what we're seeing.
The unfortunate answer is time. We've got in our wish list backlog tasks of go through old events and tie them into content in various ways. And as much as we'd love to do that, well, there's 40 hours a week.
Right.
And so much of that is eaten up by meetings, and then there's all the other stuff that we're working on, and bug fixes, and yeah, as much as I'd like to go through various old events and go, okay, give you something unique if you've got this combination, it's then, if you make it too granular, as you say, people won't see it.
Correct.
But if you make it not granular enough, is it rewarding enough? Yeah, something I'd like to do, and I'm sure as and when we have time to go through the backlog of events and dig sites and everything, we will probably be doing things like this.
Don't even get me started about dig sites. Jesus, it's just I hate it so much.
What do you have against the first contact? No, dig site. No, espionage system.
No. I think the espionage system itself, sure, it needs a little bit of love. I just think that the whole the way archaeology is done is just Indiana Jones steps into a tunnel. He needs to do a step forward. I'm gonna roll the dice 15 times. Yes, I rolled a 6. I may take another step forward. There are some events here and there, but there's no branching of things. This is why I really, really like the Enigmatic Fortress, right? Because the Enigmatic Fortress, whilst it's one of the older events in the game in terms of expansions, etc., but it has these branching paths and options, which is why I really like the situation system, because it brings options and meaningful decisions and consequences. Whereas archaeology, it's just leave it alone and it will resolve itself. There is no meaningful things there.
So if you had your way, our archaeology sites would have branching narratives.
If possible. Not so much necessarily narratives, but options at least. A lot of these dig sites are presented as... let's take a look at the... I think it's the Chameleon Field, the tomb with the spiritualist head of the fallen empire.
I think I remember that one.
Yes.
Let me bring it up.
So that one in particular, right? It really feels like it's a death trap, or it's supposed to be something along those lines. There are all sorts of weird things that need to be going on there. But now it's just like, oh, you find a button. Oh, you open the door. It doesn't really feel like a... Like, I really understand that... Like, Stellaris is not a game about characters, right? It's not about character stories. It's about the player story and how they do things over time, etc., and the growth of the Empire. But it really feels like there is a sort of choose-your-own-adventure style thing there, which is, again, why I really like the Enigmatic Fortress, because it does have these branching paths, and they do have situations of rock falls, everybody dies, which is not necessarily the most fun thing for a game, but it's still consequences. That's what I was alluding to.
I will bring it up in the next meeting that I have with our content designers and see if we can add a bit more Tomb of Horrors into some dig sites and a few more consequences.
Just don't make it a priority. It's just an opinion of like one game director to another game designer, right? Like, don't let my vision of what things should be like dictate or overrule what Steven wants.
But yes, more consequences is nice. I'm a fan of actions having consequences.
Exactly, and this is also why, for instance, let's say that you have an event at the early game, right? There is this one event where you find a crystalline lattice on an asteroid, and you can either dig it up and kill it to get the minerals, or you can study it. Events like that, I would love to see to have impact on events super far in the future, where you have, say, a follow-up event, and you're just like, oh, I did this like 40 years ago in in-game time, and this is a consequence of that action. That's the kind of, sort of butterfly effect that I really like. And it's really difficult to program for, because it's just so many variety in actions. And
I can think of one event we do have that is like that.
Which would be? That you mean...
the Pricky T.
Which one?
The Pricky T.
Oh, you mean the...
When you find a shielded world, right. And, well, if you let them out of the shield, you've just let loose a fanatic purifier in the galaxy.
Correct.
That definitely has consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I like that. That's fun. It's the same thing with Wanderlust. If you take the wrong options with Wanderlust, there is a bigger chance of the unbiddenness spawn later in the game. I think it's like 5 to 10%. Like, it's not a lot, but it's still impactful. So we're talking about we're talking about events, right? And game design things. When you're looking at the game right now and you're seeing massive potential because it's sci-fi and you can do whatever you want. But when it comes to the constraints of, say, the engine or the underlying infrastructure, the way everything is set up, what are the things that you want to do but you simply cannot because of how things work?
Honestly, like I've said, the main limiter on what I can and can't do, at least from my perspective, is just due to the amount of time I have. because I've been playing Stellaris since release,
Right, haven't we all?
and I've been like taking release day off to play it, sort of thing. And now I'm working on it, so I'm very familiar with what it is, and I think that almost subconsciously influences what sort of designs I might have and ideas I might have, to the point of I'm not truly aware of what is blocking my designs framework wise, because I'm just thinking about that in the back of my head automatically, and it's not even a conscious concern.
Well,
if you get me.
Let's put it this way. Are you constrained by... are there things that you would want to do but you can't do because it's too constraining by the vision? Let's say that you're thinking, okay, I want to make scientists or governors more interesting in terms of giving them stories that you're more attached to them because it doesn't really fit within the overall scope of the game.
Not something I've personally thought of.
Okay.
But even the ideas that I have come up with, Stephen gives everyone on the team a remarkable amount of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, every week we have a design meeting where anyone on the team, be they art, QA, design, whatever, tech, whoever you, can come along and pitch ideas. And then for each of the quarterly patches, anyone can pitch a proposal. And I literally mean anyone on the team. So, and Stephen is very open to, if you are passionate about wanting to get something in, it might not be able to get into this patch, but what about the next patch?
Mm-hmm.
Or there's been ideas I've come up with which has gone, we can't quite fit that into this patch or the next, but we'll see about getting into the patch after. So that, from my perspective, is great. So no complaints from me there.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically, it goes onto the wouldn't it be cool pile, so to speak.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of the list of ideas of wouldn't it be cool is unfathomably long.
Right. So, for instance, let's say there was a list, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with it, the Martin list of things to want into the game. I think it kind of started with that, and it just expanded beyond that point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So things like I don't know, civilian ships that travel back and forth as backdrop setting and stuff like that between systems to make them look more alive is not really a thing on that list, I would say.
Not something I've heard mentioned recently.
It was a thing back, I think, in 1.8, 1.9 or something like that. So it's yeah, it was on the list at the time, but I think it's kind of fallen by the leeway. Well, we'll keep it for the sequel or something along those lines. If you look at the game right now and you are looking at it and you're thinking by yourself, yes, I want to add this, but it's never going to happen because of a variety of reasons, what would you do? Depends
on the reasons. If it's because there might not be enough time in the schedule for whatever the idea is, well, I might spend some of my own personal development time working on a prototype for the feature to see if I can convince people, this is what the prototype's like. It's actually really good. Can we consider this for XYZ patch?
Do you have any examples?
I've been chatting with Stephen about bringing back culture workers, and I was playing around with the prototype of them. What was it? Was it earlier this week or last week? Because when we did the Unity rework, we saw a lot of people were upset about, culture workers now exist in one place in the game, and that's the building the artist enclave can give you. And even so, they're a bit out of place in how the game currently works, because they're this weird job that gives you Unity and society research, but they're not a bureaucrat and they're not a researcher. They're their own thing. So I've been thinking, could we reintroduce culture workers, and where would it be appropriate to put them in, and what would it be appropriate for them to do? That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be something I also want to experiment with over summer. And if the experiments pan out, we might see them added back into the game. If not, they might go on the back burner for a bit, much like Industrial Districts did.
The Industrial Districts, I remember. Are there any such experiments that you can talk about that failed horribly and have gone into the trash bin into the long term?
Um,
Have you had any cut your darlings, so to speak?
I've actually had some people in the team tell me I'm too eager to kill my babies.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Which, yeah, but occasionally you go, okay, maybe I could re-examine this idea and look at another day. Probably the idea that I've been told know the most about, and which is now almost a meme internal inside the team, is my desire to remove assault armies as trainable units.
Right. Which is the thing that everybody wants, because assault armies make no sense.
But, yeah. I mean, my pitch is just replace them with drop pod modules and ships.
Yeah, may as well, right? Well, good luck experimenting with that one. Exactly. So, based on that, I think we need to have an update on one particular topic. Has a UX designer gotten on board yet? And more importantly, do I have a jacket already or what?
So we've got a new UX designer started this month.
Oh wow, okay, that's quick.
These things occasionally happen, but I think Stephen said in order for you to get a jacket, we had to hire a UX designer that listed you as a referral.
Oh, yeah, they did, right?
I'll have to chase that up if they did. I don't think they did.
That Byron, this is important. This is important, okay? Let me get in touch with this UX designer directly, and I will ask him to reapply if needed. All right?
You can bring that up with Stephen in your next chat with him.
Yeah, when he comes back when the team comes back from vacation. And that brings me to the last part here. The Dev Diaries are going to be on hold for, I believe, around 6 weeks because of the holidays. And after that, there will be more work being done on the very recent announcement of the 3.5 Fornax patch. So I'm looking forward to that. We can't talk too much about it at this moment in time, which is unfortunate, but that probably has more to do with the fact that nothing about it is concrete at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think we'll probably have a lot more to share about 3.5 after summer.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll hopefully have a dev diary about, okay, what panned out with some experiments, what didn't. But
yeah, maybe do a dev diary about this is what we tried on the summer and this is what crashed and burned.
Because I know, just thinking about what we've talked about, I'm looking at various things to do with tradition trees, and Stephen's looking at reworking various aspects of combat.
Yes.
And one of our content designers wanted to do a pass on relics.
Ooh.
Along with some folks doing more investigation into performance and the like.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping some of these experiments will bear fruit, but since July is an experimental time, there's no pressure, no promises.
Yeah, I read the previous dev diary about the relics changes. That looks very interesting and make them a little bit more give him a little bit more fluff, so to speak. I think that's really interesting. The combat rebalance, I don't see that happening before 2023, to be honest, because it's such a massive undertaking. So we'll see how that pans out. And yeah, as you mentioned, the other remaining things. I think that whatever comes out of the experimentation side of things, you have to do a dev diary about it. See what happened. Why does something work? Why doesn't something not work, etc. I think people are very interested in that sort of discussion, and it gives a certain level of transparency on things, right? So, and that's something that the Stellaris team has already been very, very good at it. I found to thank you therefore, because it's usually really difficult to get developers to talk in this sort of environment, where it's more like a podcast style thing. Other studios are a little bit more tight-lipped about these sort of things.
I am happy that we're able to, and I'm happy that PR and marketing let us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you to PR and marketing for making this possible. Then, next time, shall we bring you and Stephen in together, and we can talk as a three-way?
That will be utter chaos, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe something for PDXCon as well. That'll be a fun time.
Well, if you're there, I'll see you there.
If I'm there, I'll see you there. Thank you, Byron, so much for joining today, talking about all the wonders of game design coming out of QA, the issues and the challenges of working with Stellaris. And thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you next time. Yeah, no problem.